Welcome to Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to New Mexicans by State Employees Credit Union, who have been proudly serving the families of New Mexico locally and abroad since 1958. State Employees Credit Union is ready to help you and your family with all your financial goals. And now, Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater.
Welcome to the program. I'm Diane Kinderwater. Is this the scariest time in your life, living now with this battle against the COVID virus? Is this the scariest? Are you frightened now? Or maybe you lived during the Cuban Missile Crisis back in the early 60s? Were you around there? Were you scared? How about the war in Afghanistan? And of course, we all probably were around for 9/11, September 11th, 2001, when they downed the World Trade Centers and, of course, the Pentagon. So, scary times in our life. All that means is it's important for our country to be prepared. Were we prepared for COVID as we hoped? Perhaps not. Were we prepared for these other wars, these other battles, these other frightening times in our life? We'll see. We'll discuss it today because we know with preparation, being prepared for what our country is faced with means that we have to do a lot of testing. And my guest on the program today, I'll call an expert about testing. He's formerly retired with the U.S. Air Force, and he's going to discuss how our country is really involved with testing, future arms, current arms, and what that means to our safety. So please stay with us as we discuss the importance of testing for our safety of our country and of ourselves. So we'll be back right after this. Well, we're hoping to give you a feeling of safety and security on the program today because, of course, our country, our military does do a lot of testing of its missile systems, and my guest knows more than me about it, and he's going to share his knowledge and to make us feel perhaps pretty confident, right, in our country and what our military is doing. Is Joe Brown. Thank you so much, Joe, for being a part of this. With the U.S. military for, I think, over 30 years with the Air Force, and of course also was a specialist to the commander.
Well, yes, my last assignment, I was advisor to the two-star general that ran the Air Force Flight Test Center. That's what it was called at the time. Since I retired in 2010, matter of fact, it was 2 years and 6 days later, they changed it to the Air Force Test Center, which meant that all Air Force testing for developing new weapon systems were managed out of there. It already was the largest test location, test site in the world. And I was so thrilled to be able to work there for 31 years.
And that was in California at the
at Edwards Air Force Base.
Air Force Base, which is what, just north of Los Angeles?
Yes, it is. When you go past Edwards, you're leaving Los Angeles County. It's
okay.
It's about 70 to 100 miles north of downtown Los Angeles.
You are integral in that,
Mm-hmm.
but again, this show is about our Department of Defense
Mm-hmm.
and the importance of testing to make sure that we're prepared for what could be coming around the corner and what we're
Correct.
always prepared for. But it's fascinating what you did. It's fascinating the project. I'm going to call it the Anti-Echo Chamber, which is what size of, I don't know, a few football fields and seven-story tall building that you managed the construction of.
Right.
So I call it Anti-Echo. Why don't you take it away, Joe,
Okay.
and tell us what the heck is this?
All right, well,
It's huge, and I know the door, I think one of the doors is the biggest piece of equipment ever produced for a building. So,
correct. I'll do it like an anecdote, a story. Picture me sitting at my desk February of 1987, and I get a call at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's a guy that I'm acquainted with, a very senior civil servant for the Air Force out at Edwards. And he goes, "Joe, He said, can you tell me about an anechoic chamber? And I said, well, I can spell it. He says, okay, you're hired.
Okay, spell it. A-N.
N-E-C-H-O-I-C. Anechoic,
Anechoic.
Latin word that means anti-echo. Now, at the anechoic chamber that we built, we're not concerned about echo of sound. It's echo of electronic signals, like radars, for instance. I'll explain. Anyway, I go down and meet with some people, and out of that comes a project to create the largest anechoic chamber in history, and it still is.
And why is it so important to have an anechoic chamber to test things?
Okay.
And we're going to talk about the building and all that, how
Sure.
impressive that is, but why do we care? Why do we care?
Okay, the purpose was that we had a bomber called the B-1 that was in development of what's known as an electronic warfare system on the aircraft, meaning it wants to be able to see the bad guy before the bad guy sees them, okay? Stealthy.
Thank you.
Well, stealthy. So there was no place in the world that you could, in private, in secret, do that kind of work the way we needed to do it.
And you needed to be in a chamber or a building large enough to be able to test the different radars or
Exactly.
radar without you had to bounce it off to be able to test it.
Yes.
So it had to be enclosed,
Well,
okay.
what we wanted was to be able to shoot a signal at the aircraft and it not come back on us. Anything that came back was off the aircraft. Everything else was as if it was out in the world. And so we lined this big steel box with polyurethane foam cones. And I have a picture, hopefully they'll be able to put that up, that'll show that room. That picture has a U-2 aircraft in it, which is a very sophisticated spy aircraft. I worked a lot in the world of the spy, the CIA, the NSA, and all of those folks, a lot, because that's where we knew what the bad guy was doing. And so this anechoic chamber was built over time. We opened in 1989. Our first customer was that B-1 bomber that needed the help. And we created a electronic picture of the bad guy to
Shoot
test,
at the B-1 bomber.
Exactly, to test whether that bomber could see the bad guy.
Coming,
Yes.
the radar.
Yes.
Okay.
This is the main reason we built it. Now, over time, during my time testing there, we did a lot of different wonderful things, all in the privacy of that room. That room, in our terms...
You call it a room, Joe? Really?
Yes.
A room?
A room of about a football field long, about a football field wide, and 7 stories tall. You were right on as far as that goes. Huge room. As a matter of fact, the largest aircraft in the Air Force inventory is actually the C-17 cargo airplane. I had a C-17 in that room.
In that
Yes,
building.
I did. Yes.
The importance of this, it saved lives, it saved money. What did producing, I know it was multi-million dollars to
Yes.
actually build this
Yes.
this chamber.
Yes.
But it resulted in what?
Well, 2 things. One, it was expensive, yes, but we were given a budget, and we came in on time, under budget. I'm a taxpayer too. I want our taxpayers to know that this magnificent place was built on budget and on time.
Do you remember how long it took to build it and
We
how much?
started breaking ground in the fall of '87. We opened for business July of '89. Something this large and this sophisticated we did in less than 2 years.
They can't even build some of these mini mansions.
I know.
In Texas or here in New Mexico with that lake. Okay.
I totally get it, but we were focused. We were focused.
What was the price tag?
$52,800,000. And we had a $53 million budget. So we got close.
You're down. You're under budget.
But anyway, let me tell you an anecdote a little later. We had
But again, I was saying this 52 million saved a lot of lives.
and that's what I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
Okay. Toward the end of my time as chief of testing there, we were in Kosovo and Bosnia area, and we were going to send our newest versions of the C-130 gunship to that war. And so the Air Force and Lockheed took what I call the pick of the litter, the best of the new ones, and gave it to me to test. And within a week, we found a very significant problem that the actual, what we call shooter, the system that could have knocked it out of the air, the most likely one, the aircraft would have been blind to it. And that would have meant that that aircraft and its crew would have been killed, and the others, as well as that put the people they were there to support in more danger. But we caught it, we corrected it, and when it was fielded, we didn't lose an aircraft. And we didn't lose
And I
it.
bet how much are those, not the human life told,
Oh.
but how much is an aircraft like that cost?
Oh, well, let's just put it that 14 bird, as we called it, that 14 aircraft fleet cost a whole lot more than $52 million.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So, and that's one example. And like I said, I'm providing a picture that may show up on the screen. I don't know if it has during the program, but
I have this. So I'm going to hold this up, but they're going to show it as well. So this is an aircraft in the chamber.
see how that is a full-sized operational U-2 aircraft,
Right here.
and it looks small in that chamber. And that was the latest version of that aircraft. Again, the purpose for the chamber,
This is the whole chamber here.
that's, yes.
Wow.
And Diane, that
This is pretty cool.
that was the purpose. We tested the state-of-the-art, the most advanced, and it was such a pleasure to be part of that. Now, I went on to do what you talked about, how the testing needs to be preparing for the future. Well, my last 10 years, I was doing strategic planning, and I sat on panels across the DoD with people from the Navy and the Marines and the Army and so forth, discussing where do we need to be with our capability to protect our nation in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. And so I spent a great deal of time doing that, and in that role, while doing that role, I also advised the two-star general that managed the Air Force's Air Force Flight Test Center, and that was a lot of fun, I'll have to say.
And that's different than this.
That's a different role than this. This was very specific to be chief of testing
At this.
at this site.
And the other, but you kind of changed the name, or you got it the Navy. Now because of your idea, it was after you retired, a couple of years after,
Right.
they accepted
Yes,
your idea
yes.
of one test center for the whole
Right.
military.
During that 10 years, I was a very vocal advocate that we should streamline testing across the DoD, and certainly we could do it within the Air Force. And I'll be honest, there were politicians across the nation that might have lost a test site.
Sure.
Or might have had a reduced role, and I'm going to admit that there might have been some jobs lost, absolutely. But I felt that we would do a better job in the Air Force, and actually the DoD, if we streamlined things and had a single boss, at least for each service. Well, it was coming on, but it wasn't there yet. But I was really pleased when I got an email from some of my old friends about 2 years, again, and 6 days later, the Air Force Flight Test Center became the Air Force Test Center, and that two-star general managed all the testing as we developed
For all the military branches.
for the Air Force, and he has a counterpart with the other services.
And is that located in? Where's the test center?
The Air Force Test Center is at Edwards. The
Okay,
headquarters is still at Edwards, but they manage a site in Florida, in Tennessee, in places I can't mention, and so forth. So in other words, some of the other locations, they have a very strong colonel there to manage the local folks, but they answer and are overall managed by the two-star.
Tell me a little bit about the testing at these facilities. What are they testing?
Okay, out at Edwards, it's primarily flight and some weapons delivery, and again, electronic warfare. The, quote, black boxes, the computers, and their sensor systems, I'll use that term instead of just antenna, because they're not all antennas, but they're sensors that they can see the bad guy before the bad guy can see them, and then their ability to fly and do the various things. That's at Edwards. Weapons and things of that nature are primarily done out at Eglin Air Force Base at Fort Walton Beach, Florida. They now work for Edwards for that purpose. There's other things on Eglin, but that testing is managed out at Edwards. And we have wind tunnels and some other wonderful things that are needed to develop new aircraft. They're at Tullahoma, Tennessee, and that is also now managed by Edwards. And then there's some places that, well, we've acknowledged now that Area 51 exists. Okay, you know, we work with them too. But anyway,
and that's in
Nevada.
Nevada.
And so there's always been some level of testing out there, and as well as a great deal of training of our pilots. Nellis at Las Vegas is where the weapons school is, they call it, and a lot of tremendous work is done there in training our pilots.
When you speak of weapons systems, what are you speaking about?
It could be an aircraft, could be a missile, could be a bomb, could be any number of things that can be weaponized. Satellites. In the chamber, we tested some satellites. It's a broad term, and to get specific, I probably would venture into places I shouldn't go on television.
But what can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you that without hesitation, that we have the most sophisticated weapon systems in the world. Now, does that mean that other countries aren't working their butts off? Pardon my term, but work their butts off to become a true adversary. Absolutely they are. And the world that I lived in was the Air Force, but my clearances, if I use the term clearance, I hope the public knows that that's like you're given a clearance that you're cleared to be able to learn a secret or a top secret or whatever. I worked in the beyond top secret world for most of my career.
You mean beyond top secret?
Beyond.
Like after top secret, there's something beyond top. So top secret?
Yes. What I mean is, once you're at top secret, you've been cleared that you could pretty much be trusted with anything. But my world was very compartmentalized. There's something that's tacked on sometimes to a top secret clearance, and it's called SCI. Separate compartmented information. And it means that I might be in the building where the anechoic chamber is, and the people in room 104 have no idea what the people in 103 are doing. But they're both doing top secret work.
Beyond top secret.
Beyond top
They're
secret.
going top secret.
But anyway, so because of where I've lived, I'm very, as of 2010, I was very aware of what we had and what our adversaries had. And I was pretty comfortable when I retired that we were in good shape. I can't imagine that that's changed a great deal, if at all. If it has, I hope it's changed, that we're just better off now than we were then. That would be wonderful. But things like one of the last aircraft that I really had any design influence on was the F-22 Raptor.
We had them here in New Mexico for a while.
Yes, you did.
I think in Clovis.
Holloman
Air Force Base.
But anyway, yes, you did. There are other places, but anyway, my point is this: that was such a leap beyond anything else that was out there.
Actually, at the recently, or at least February, I think it was 7th, during the Super Bowl, was it a Raptor that flew over the stadium? If you saw it, there were three aircraft, and I don't know what I thought. One was a Raptor, or maybe you can't see that one.
Well,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, you can.
You can.
You can, depending on, well, if they want you to see it, you can see it.
Okay.
But what I'm going to say is, I missed that part. I saw the game, but my understanding is that an F-22, a B-2, and something else.
I think it was a
Raptor. There
Raptor.
were three.
It's kind of like stealth.
Yeah, it's a stealth fighter,
Yeah.
basically.
Okay.
But anyway, and of course there's an F-35 now.
But you were talking about the Raptor. I sidetracked you.
No, that's fine.
Seen it.
But you know, you do testing on the actual aircraft under development, and sometimes you actually go in and test things that aircraft needs to defeat as well. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You need to know as much as you can about whatever that adversary is. So I guess if there's anything I really would want from my experience for the public to feel good about, is that we were okay. Now, you mentioned in the preliminary about 9/11. Well, I was at Edwards at 9/11, and for the next 2 years, I was working to figure out how in the blank that happened. Because
you were a part of that.
Yes. Yes, I spent 2 years of my life. Well, again, I was cleared and working with intelligence information. We should have had the intelligence beyond what we had, because I think we could have avoided it. But for a number of years before 2001, we had a significant loss of capability, especially in the intelligence world. Funding was taken.
Wasn't a priority for that particular
administration. Very good. Good term. And so we lost a lot of work that is typically done by human beings. People that know that there's various kinds of intelligence, ELINT, HUMINT, and all this stuff, which is terms I shouldn't be using. Well, it's not classified, it's just nobody understands it. But there's human intelligence and electronic intelligence and other kinds of intelligence that's gathered. Well, the one that took the biggest hit was human intelligence. In other words, fewer spies and fewer people that we could have from other countries helping us in the spy world.
Joe, you mentioned towards the end of your career, when you retired in 2010, you were asked to be an advisor of what our country, what our Department of Defense needed the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. You worked for your lengthy career, over 30 years in the Air Force and as a civilian working for the Department of Defense.
For military and civilian, that I want to make sure that everyone understands. It covered pretty much 40 years, but 31 of it was at Edwards, and most of that was as a civil servant. But I started my time out at Edwards as a military guy. Yeah. But at any rate,
with that, they asked you
twice.
to search out the next 30 years.
Yes, part of what I did.
What are you able to tell us, what kind of advice, what our country needs to look towards over the next now probably 20 years?
Well,
and we only have a couple minutes left.
Well, my parting shot mostly was around two things. One, don't let us get caught in where we don't know what the other guy is doing. So we must stay very vigilant
Okay.
about our intelligence world, and then we have to be very careful and be the smartest people in the world on things like the internet and the growth of various sensors, because a tremendous amount of information ends up in the wrong hands by way of, let's just say that China could easily know as much about some things as we do.
Okay.
And we developed it. So,
Oh, okay. You brought this shuttle support
Yes.
team. Tell me about that.
in my military career at Edwards, I was the chief of the crew that worked with NASA to create what they call the Space Shuttle network of places where it was tracked as it orbited. And we also worked with NASA in the development of the shuttle. And the original Space Shuttle team were all given a jacket. And so this is my memento from being the chief of the Air Force crew that worked with NASA for the first 6 orbital missions of the Columbia. And they gave us this at a ceremony after the first landing out at Edwards Air Force Base.
We're so fortunate, Joe Brown, to have you in New Mexico with your wealth of information. I know you're involved with the New Mexico Westerners organization.
Yes.
I know that you're involved with the Corrales Writing Club.
Yep.
You're also with the International Western Music Association.
Mm-hmm.
What a treasure you've been to our nation
Well,
in helping to protect us.
appreciate that.
But what a treasure you continue to be in all your various roles in our state.
I appreciate you for that. Thank you.
And you've
I'm
brought-
just an Okie here doing the best I can with what I got.
Yeah, and he's from Oklahoma. Can you believe it? Thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for all you've done for Issues and Answers, and we'll have you back. Fascinating information. Joe Brown.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, folks. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater is presented as a public service to New Mexicans by State Employees Credit Union, which has proudly been serving the families in New Mexico locally and abroad since 1958. State Employees Credit Union is ready to help you and your family with all your financial goals and is the exclusive sponsor of Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater in order to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program or to purchase a DVD copy of any Issues and Answers program, visit sunbroadcasting.org or call us at 505-345-1991.